I'm Aaron Goddard, workspace sales lead at Byte, and today we're here with Ben Ward, principal sales engineer at iGEL. Today we want to talk to iGEL regarding some key innovations for 2022 and what trends you're seeing in the end user compute market space. Ben, would you like to do a very quick introduction?
Yeah, hey there. So yeah, as you said, I'm principal SE in UK and I'm field technologist at iGEL. So I've been at iGEL for a year now. Before that, I was at VMware doing end user computing for 6.5 years, and before that, I was at Citrix. So I've been doing end user computing for the whole of my vendor career. That's me.
A well-traveled man by the sound of things.
I've been around.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that, Ben. I really appreciate you supporting us today. Where do you see the trends in 2022?
Well, for end user computing. Okay, that's a great question. You know what? I've had lots and lots of conversations about this over the past couple of years or so about end user computing and what the top trends are. And I think, without a doubt, number one is digital employee experience management. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. DEX. We've seen this everywhere. Everyone is talking about it. And I think it's because, I don't want to say the word pandemic, but I'm going to say it because of what happened. People have been working remotely. They're now no longer visible in the office. You need a way to understand how they're getting on, whether or not IT is a problem for them. So digital employee experience management has definitely been, I would say, number one for the past 18 months to 2 years. And we're seeing a lot of vendors in that space as well. And I think some of the companies that have seen the biggest drive towards new business over the past 18 months or so, I mean, you've got the likes of Lakeside, who are doing an absolutely storming job when it comes to DEX. You've got the likes of VMware, obviously, who have their Deem offering built into intelligence. You've got Citrix, who have partnered with NextThink as well to bring to market for their customers this entire employee experience management piece and employee experience monitoring. So that's absolutely critical. And there's no doubt that's been pretty much number one in the market. I think number two in this as well, and I think this maybe had a little bit of a dip potentially over the past 2 years, but has really picked up in the past 6 months, is DaaS, traditional desktop as a service stuff. We're seeing a lot from Citrix and a lot from VMware about building DaaS solutions on top of Azure. So you've got Citrix Cloud on Azure, you've got Horizon Cloud on Azure as well. And I think that has really driven the DaaS messaging and the DaaS market. And of course, you've got AVD and you've got Windows 365. That is not only moving people more towards those sort of solutions, but it's widening the market. We're getting more people now interested in VDI and in DaaS. And I think number three, I mean, this should probably be number one, but over the past 6 months, ever since COP26, we've seen sustainability get a massive amount of focus. And I think probably going into the tail end of 2022, into 2023, we're going to see sustainability top of the agenda for so many organizations. I mean, come April this year in the UK, we're going to see the top 1,300 companies in the UK be mandated to report on sustainability, on both their sustainability investments and how they're being sustainable businesses. And I think that is going to drive behavior right across the market, and everybody is going to be talking about sustainability. There'll be no getting away from it. So those are what I would say are the top three trends for the rest of this year.
Can you give us a quick introduction to iGEL?
Yeah, of course. So I think everyone's heard of iGEL, and that's right, because we've been around for about 20 years or so. I think a lot of people still see us as the thin client vendor, that vendor that puts those little black boxes next to a monitor and then uses that to consume Citrix or VMware or Microsoft VDI. We've moved on from that. So we're still about consuming VDI, we're still about consuming virtual Windows desktops and applications, but now we're more about the endpoint operating system. So that's what iGEL's about these days, not so much about the hardware, more about that endpoint operating system that's been created and designed to grab those virtual apps and virtual desktops from the big vendors.
Perfect, thank you. And in terms of the history of iGEL, would you mind giving us a bit of a recap?
Yeah, of course. So, as I said, we started about 20 years ago, and it was actually started as a German company. And the whole idea behind what iGEL did was to create that hardware to consume, to be thin clients. There you go. I've said it. I said the word thin clients. So iGEL started as a thin client company to be able to consume virtual apps and desktops, and it took over the entire thin client market in Germany. And then after a couple of years, the decision was made to expand across the rest of the world, with the US being a prime target. So after a number of years, iGEL being pretty successful, they came up with this idea, which was to take that software, that really key software that ran on those thin clients, those pieces of hardware, and make it available across any x86-based device. So the universal desktop converter came about, where you could run the iGEL operating system across multiple different devices. And from there, the whole idea of what iGEL did really took off and really evolved. And a lot of you have probably seen the likes of the UD Pocket, which is this little USB stick you can put into most devices and then simply boot into iGEL, the secure workspace. So a couple of years ago, we made the decision to move even more into that software role. So after 20 years or so, well, 18 years or so of making the thin clients, now our focus is 90% on the operating system. You can still get the hardware, but really our focus is software. So that's iGEL, 20 years of focusing on enterprise endpoint management.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm aware of the history. I was involved in some way, shape, or form when iGEL first came into the UK market, and I do remember
Wow.
quite well. So when I was in my distribution days, selling
Older than you
Citrix,
look then.
selling Citrix and VMware technologies, and iGEL adopted those technology vendors quite early on. But could you give us maybe a bit about how you've evolved from, I know you've talked about moving away from just being that physical piece, thin client technology to the operating system, with the likes of Citrix with their virtual apps and desktops, and with VMware with their Horizon technology and Workspace ONE. You've now ventured into the Microsoft world as well?
Absolutely. So I think Citrix is where a lot of people in this space originally got their start. I mean, Citrix has been around for over 30 years, pioneering virtual apps and desktops. We know that they innovated in this space massively, and that's where iGEL sort of had most of its market for a long time. But then you've got the likes of VMware with VDI, and of course Microsoft. And I think Microsoft really disrupted is probably the wrong word. Microsoft really expanded the market when they came out with WVD and then AVD a couple of years ago, and now with the Cloud PC, their Windows 365 offering. So we have full support for consuming Microsoft-based native workspaces. I would say that most of the customers we're talking to at the moment are probably still using Citrix and VMware and putting that on top of Microsoft technology stack. So we have the support for pretty much any VDI or published virtual Windows applications and desktops platform you want to use. Those are the top three, and we have full support for all three of those.
Excellent. Could you tell me a little bit more about what makes iGEL unique in this space?
That's a good question. I think one of the reasons is we've been doing this for such a long time. We've got some great relationships, as we just called out when it comes to those three vendors. We've got great relationships with all of them. In the UK, we know a lot of the people personally. We have regular conversations with all of our counterparts. The same in the US, and in fact, I think it's that part of our USP, part of our uniqueness is that ability to have such a good relationship with the rest of the EUC ecosystem. I mean, first and foremost, we are an EUC company. That's what we do. We are a dedicated end user computing company. You look at VMware, you look at Microsoft, they do lots of cool stuff around EUC, but they do lots of other stuff as well. We are end user computing, similar to how Citrix are. And when it comes to that ecosystem, we have something called the iGEL Ready program. And that's where over 100 different vendors in the EUC space have partnered with us and signed off and tested their integrations. So we've got the likes of, the traditional VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, we've got ControlUp, we've got Lakeside, we've got all the hardware vendors as well, because we've got the scars of dealing with enterprises and lots of different types of organizations over the past 20 years. We understand all the different bits that go along with creating an operating system, with integrating with existing enterprise technologies, and then with leveraging them to get access to VDI and published Windows applications. And I suppose, on top of the ecosystem, which is really cool. One of the other pieces that I really like, and I'm really getting behind right now, is sustainability. And I think it should be pretty obvious why iGEL has got such a strong sustainability message. So if you think about one of our core capabilities in this space, and that's repurposing, and I think we've already touched on it. But the idea that you can take the operating system that we've got and put it on existing x86, so Intel, AMD based hardware. And what that means is if you have machines, maybe you have desktops, maybe you have laptops, which could be 3, 4, 5 years old. You don't need to go through that whole pain of a refresh cycle, especially if you're using a VDI platform in the back end, especially if you're using something like Citrix to grab all of that experience, to grab those Windows desktops and applications. What you can do is you can use iGEL and just repurpose those endpoints. So instead of having a refresh cycle every 4 years, every 4 or 5 years, you can have a refresh cycle every 8 or 10 years. And that means
Yeah.
you're getting rid of that refresh cycle right in the middle. And one of the stats that I think shocked me recently was the fact that 83% of a device's total environmental footprint is actually accrued during manufacturing. So if you're getting rid of that refresh cycle halfway through, getting rid of that refresh cycle after 4 or 5 years, actually you are saving at least 83% of the ecological impact of a device. No one else in this space can do that. I mean, Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, they've got great sustainability messages around putting things into Azure, potentially being more efficient. But realistically, by foregoing one of those refreshes, you are saving massively more energy and having a much smaller impact on the environment. So you take those two together, you take iGEL with repurposing with a VDI platform, then in fact, you have an incredibly sustainable environment. And that's one of the things that gets me excited. And I think it's one of our key USPs in this space.
You're absolutely right. It's an incredible statistic. To know that 83% of that footprint is actually done during a manufacturing stage is incredible. But also
Shocking.
shocking, incredible. The longevity that you can bring to an energy to compute environment in terms of device refreshes. There's huge component issue shortages at the moment as well. So
Mm.
in terms of getting your hands on some of these new devices, wherever they may come from, there could be some large delays. So having that ability to repurpose those devices, as you mentioned, convert them into an iGEL thin client with a piece of software, I mean, that speaks volumes.
I mean, that's without even talking about the cost implication of having to, I don't know, refresh 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 devices. You're talking millions potentially. Whereas if you're using iGel, you're keeping, not only you being, environmentally conscious, but you're also saving on the cost of rebuying all of those devices. So for me, and obviously I'm biased in all of this, Aaron, but for me, it just makes complete sense. I sound like a sales guy now. I'm not. I'm an SE.
Thank you. Look, I know we've covered quite a lot of this already, but why do customers choose iGel?
I think it's because we do have that credibility. I think because we've been around for such a long time, because we're a known brand, we're a trusted brand. When it comes to what we do, I don't think there's anyone else in this space who's got such a big trusted name to go along with it. And the fact that we have customers across pretty much across every vertical, whether or not it's finance, we've got reference cases in the UK, whether or not it's healthcare, NHS, if it's manufacturing, we have got customers right across the board, across multiple verticals, who are very, very happy with our stack. And that gives us credibility when it comes to the enterprise. That gives us credibility across every different part of the market. So it's not like we've got a very niche product here. What we've got is a whole solution, which is fantastic across whatever the use case is, whatever the pain point. We know that iGel has probably already done this before, it's tried and tested, and we know what we're doing when it comes to VDI, published applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bytes ourselves, we trust you implicitly when it comes to our customers as well. We know that you're a very safe pair of hands. You've got a sound message, and you're always on hand to support. So it is a great relationship, and we really,
It's good
really
to
do
hear.
appreciate that. So if you don't mind, just before we wrap things up, could you give us an idea, an indication of what the future of iGel might look like?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone's got an NDA, haven't they? I'm kidding. Yeah, of course. So at the moment, our focus is on, obviously, you've heard of our sustainability focus, but our focus is all on consuming traditional VDI and DAS based services. So full Windows desktop or RDS type desktop or published applications. That's where our focus is, being the absolutely best endpoint operating system, the best endpoint for consuming those sort of services. But we also understand that SaaS is quickly becoming the biggest way of working. We're seeing that right across the market. We're seeing lots of people consume SaaS applications from multiple different vendors. So with our current offering, we have a full focus on VDI and DAS, but we also have the ability to allow users to consume SaaS applications, and that's the direction of travel. So as you see, I mean, this year, as you see our next version of the operating system, you'll be able to see that focus in SaaS start to mature even more. And that's because we're prepared and we're positioned to take full advantage of not only the traditional just VDI, but the full gamut of applications used in the enterprise. So whether or not they're SaaS, whether or not they're Windows-based applications, iGel is there to consume them all. So that's the future that we see ahead of us, the ability to consume every application, no matter where it is.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much for that. And before we wrap up, again, one of the things that I'm aware that you're also going to be participating in is our panel, which is going to be a live panel event during the main speaking presentation. So please feel free to shamelessly plug your on-demand session as we've just recorded today. And let's see if we can drive as many people towards this session as possible. I'd
Absolutely.
like to say I'd really appreciate iGEL and all the support you guys have offered to us over the last couple of years. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Take care.